All right, welcome to another episode of the National Pulse. I realize it's been a while, so thank you for your patience. It's Tuesday, June the 8th. When did it become June? Just looked at my calendar. June the 8th, apparently. 2021, broadcasting from an impossibly hot Capitol Hill. You know, I'm so English, I will talk about the weather all day long, and I will complain about the weather's extremes all day long. When it's cold, it's far too cold. When it's warm, it's sweltering hot. That is Washington, D.C. I suppose they do call it a swamp for a reason, but there's other reasons they call it a swamp, and we're about to get into them. My guest is Natalie Winters. One day, I guarantee you, I'll be the guest on the Natalie Winters podcast. But for the time being, and she doesn't know this yet, but she'll also be the guest at 5 p.m. on the War Room today. And we're going to talk about, it's been a while since we did one of these podcasts, and the reason is sort of two or threefold. One is travel. You know, as things are opening up, as people are holding rallies and events and speeches and all that all across the country, we are increasingly required to be present on the road. And I love the road. I have lived most of my adult life. People used to ask me where I lived. I said, staring at the back of a fraying headrest somewhere over the Atlantic. And while that may not be true yet, while the transatlantic routes have not quite opened up yet, despite the pressure from the airlines, and you'll hear more about that in the G7 deliberations over the next week or so, we are still managing to get around America quite a lot. I'll bring Natalie Winters in here. Natalie, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So that's reason one. The second reason is because there's just so much to go through. I mean, you look at these thousands upon thousands of pages of Fauci emails. I'm going through them. You're going through them. I know the National Pulse Artist Collective, our members program, is going all through them. And then there's the third reason here as well, which is, that's not the only thing in the news cycle. And I spend maybe 2 hours every morning just going through, just reading all the news. I just read all the news. I have almost every single news app and subscription that you could possibly imagine. I read all the news, and it's important that we do. It's important because you can find buried leads, you can find different things, but it's incredibly time consuming. So those are my excuses for not doing the podcast in a week, and I'm sticking to them. Natalie, let's jump into this story that we've got up on the site this morning. I think it's incredibly important. Peter Daszak, as we know, you and I both identified pretty early. Usually I'll give you all the credit, but I think we both identified Daszak pretty early in this whole debacle as being probably the long-term fall guy for people like Fauci, but also he is as close as you get to the kind of villain of the piece without going right up to the top, the likes of Francis Collins and Dr. Fauci. Daszak is kind of the sous-villain. He's the under-villain. Let me play this clip, and then I want to get your feedback on it. Explain to our audience what we're hearing here.
As an example, first of all, we're only looking at viral families that include those that have gone into people from animals. So we narrow it down straight away. Then when you get a sequence of a virus and it looks like a relative of a known nasty pathogen, just like we did with SARS, we found other coronaviruses in bats, a whole host of them. Some of them looked very similar to SARS. So we sequenced the spike protein, the protein that attaches to cells. Then I didn't do this work, but my colleagues in China did the work. You create pseudoparticles, you insert the spike proteins from those viruses, see if they bind to human cells. And each step of this, you move closer and closer to this virus could really become pathogenic in people. So you narrow down the field, you reduce the cost, and you end up with a small number of viruses that really do look like killers. Then you look in people and you say, in the people that live in the region where this animal lives, that are exposed to that virus, do we see antibodies specific?
So, Natalie, just explain this to us, because you found this clip. Explain to us, what are its origins? Where did you find it? How did you find it? And what is Daszak describing there?
Sure. So I actually found this clip while going through Peter Daszak's C-SPAN profile. I've recently pivoted from YouTube to C-SPAN, going through old clips now. And Peter Daszak only has one video listed on C-SPAN. It's from 2016. It's a panel forum type discussion about pandemics, kind of the road forward. There are a couple other scientists and researchers on the panel talking. But interestingly, he says a couple words that, frankly, I would never want to hear come out of Peter Daszak's mouth, that being killer virus, spike protein, and Chinese colleagues. And I think Fauci probably feels the same way that I do about Peter Daszak saying these things, because they directly undermine what Dr. Fauci said while he was being questioned by Senator Rand Paul just a few weeks back with regards to his agency's ties to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So this clip, which just to kind of contextualize, 2016, that was right in the middle of this now very controversial grant that had been given by Fauci's National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease to Peter Daszak's EcoHealth Alliance. And this clip was 2 years into that grant, like I said, 2016. So he's talking about the kind of research that he's conducting. If it's in China and has to do with bat and SARS-like coronaviruses, it's ostensibly, related or at least somehow traced to this grant. So if you remember, Fauci basically distances his agency from really any ties to the Wuhan Institute of Virology while talking to Rand Paul, whether it's funding, personnel, right? He doesn't even know what the word Wuhan is. That's kind of the takeaway. But as the days progress,
China? What China?
Whether it was Fauci, whether it was Fauci or Collins, you saw them kind of start to reverse their tune and their tone with regard to their agency's ties to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Obviously, you played that clip on War Room. I think maybe last week, of Francis Collins admitting, well, maybe we did send some money to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, but we, quote, had no control over what they were doing. Not sure how that necessarily absolves the NIH or the NIAID of blame. Frankly, I think that makes them more culpable. But what you see from Peter Daszak really gets, again, to this other key component of this whole, origins of COVID-19, what happened in Wuhan, and that is, of course, gain-of-function research, or to put it more simply, just manipulating viruses, really weaponizing them. And that's, of course, where you talk about the spike proteins, increasing the transmissibility to humans. And I think, if you take all the science out of it, in the words of Peter Daszak, making these viruses into, quote, killers, right? His words, not mine. And of course, he defers and says, oh, well, it's my Chinese colleagues who are doing this. He doesn't name them specifically, but I would say a likely contender. This, of course, dovetails with another story that we had up on the site late last night. And she, let me get the pronunciation right, because I know Jack Kassam correcting me.
Do it incorrectly on purpose. I'm not here to learn Mandarin. That's not our jobs. And let me tell you this: if Xi Jinping, Jack Posobiec, was saying my name, I doubt she'd spend more than 12 seconds wondering how to pronounce it. So that's not what we're doing.
Yes. I was going to say, if there are three words that I wish I never knew, it would be Wuhan, gain-of-function research, and Xu Zhengli. But
Kassam.
Unfortunately, and the national goals. But unfortunately, here we are. No, but last night I was curious. I was going through Xu Zhengli's resume, and one of the first grants that she lists on there is, of course, from none other than Fauci's National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. And she goes on to list on her resume 13 studies where Peter Daszak is the co-author, two of which also list Ralph Barrick as the co-author, who is, of course, another name that was mentioned by Rand Paul and one of these really hardcore advocates for gain-of-function research. So this clip, I think, a lot of people like to say what we say, especially Peter Daszak, is conspiracy. We're not correct, although maybe there's been a little bit of a reverse course on that. But this is Peter Daszak, in his own words, really, I would say, admitting to everything that we've been hammering. And can I just say one more thing? We did our first podcast on Peter Daszak March 22nd of this year, not to mention, I think it was probably months prior that we had first said his name.
Yeah, it was February.
So
it was early February that we had first
so
flagged him. Way ahead of everybody else, by the way. I love everybody else jumping onto the bandwagon now, but way ahead of everybody else, Natalie. And it's a testament to your not just your research, which I think we all understand is incredibly diligent and time consuming and hard to do. And everybody, believe me, the not just the world, not just the people alive right now, but history will be grateful for you in that regard. And you know, what I wanted to add in here is that there's still a lot to play for. I know for a lot of people out there, Natalie, it will seem like every shot is the kill shot on this issue, but it's kind of not, because it takes the media establishment, even conservative media, but the media establishment and the political environment so long to catch up with us. I mean, you'll remember back in February as well, Natalie, I did 3 entire podcasts on Carrie Simmons and the G7. And everybody at the time was saying to me, well, you know, what are you talking about this for? And then sure enough, at the beginning of this month, or right at the end of last month, you know, the entire British media is dedicating front pages to Carrie Simmons and the G7 and everything that's going to come out of it. Look, I think the audience knows at this point that the national pulse isn't just the current pulse. It's the foresight, right? It's looking down the road, and it leads to things like this. So Rasmussen has this study out this morning. I don't know if you've seen it yet, and they've asked the audience 3 things about gain of function and Fauci. Have you seen this yet, Natalie?
No, but I'm on Rasmussen right now.
You don't need to have seen it. Don't worry. Don't try and quickly catch up before I hit you with this. You'll be able to glean from what I say what is important here. So the questions that are asked by Rasmussen here are: how closely have you followed recent news reports about US government funding for so-called gain-of-function virus research? 39% say very closely. That's remarkably high for something like this, something like the kind of sub-issue of a sub-issue. And it just goes to the heart of just how important all of this stuff is and how many people are persuaded that it was actually gain-of-function involved in this rather than soups. 32% said somewhat closely. 16% said not very closely. 8% said not at all. And 6% weren't sure about how closely they followed the news reports. Then the second question was, should the US government be funding gain-of-function research? Here was a shocker to me. So 35% say they're not sure, and I think that's actually probably quite low. I would have imagined about 50% would have said they weren't sure. But again, 39% are following it very closely, and 32% somewhat closely. So I think people are starting to make up their minds more. But the people who are making up their minds, only 31% said no, and 34% said yes. Now, when you add in the not sures into that, there's obviously everything to play for. Public opinion is there to play for. The difference between 34 and 31% between the yes and no on that question is negligible. And then the third question is, do you believe Dr. Anthony Fauci has told the truth about US government funding for gain-of-function virus research? 15% are not sure. 40% believe he has been telling the truth, and 46% believe he has not been telling the truth. We are awfully close to getting over the halfway mark in terms of the number of people. We have a plurality, but we need that to be over 50% of the number of people who think Dr. Anthony Fauci has not been telling the truth. And if you had asked that question, Natalie, just 3, 4, 5 months ago, those numbers wouldn't have been anywhere near that. I know for a lot of this audience, they think because they interact with common sense types and people who understand what's going on here, that everybody surely must see it, but it's not true. There's a whole ignorant world out there, and I got to tell you that the numbers are swinging because, in large part, because of your research. So let's go.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, whatever. Let's go. I'm very bad at giving compliments as well as receiving compliments. Let's go back to.
Well, thank you for your leadership.
Well, I mean, I wait until you see what's coming next in terms of my leadership.
The National Pulse has undergone its own gain-of-function experiment. I think we've become more transmissible, more lethal.
I did grow Natalie Winters in a lab.
Yes.
She didn't come from a soup. So look, let's go back to this Daszak quote real quick here, because I think this is all signal. So this is 2016. The forum is discussing emerging infectious diseases in the next pandemic. And the quote, as you identify, Natalie, is, he says, you create pseudoparticles, you insert the spike proteins, you see if they bind to the human cells. He says, I didn't do this work, my colleagues in China did the work. At each step of this, you move closer and closer to this virus that could become pathogenic in people, and you end up with a small number of viruses that really do look like killers. And I want people to internalize that for a second, because he says it with such flippancy in the clip. Maybe we should play it again. He says it with such flippancy. He says it with such, a lackadaisical attitude, a lack of concern, and, not like he's doing something that could lead directly to the deaths of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people around the world. To them, those people are just numbers in a broader experiment. I am inferring that from his tone. Natalie, I'm going to play it again so that people can really understand. If they didn't absorb the tone at the beginning of this, let's try and get them to do so now.
As an example, first of all, we're only looking at viral families that include those that have got into people from animals. So we narrow it down straight away. Then when you get a sequence of a virus and it looks like a relative of a known nasty pathogen, just like we did with SARS, we found other coronaviruses in bats, a whole host of them. Some of them looked very similar to SARS. So we sequenced the spike protein, the protein that attaches to cells. Then I didn't do this work, but my colleagues in China did the work. You create pseudoparticles, you insert the spike proteins from those viruses, see if they bind to human cells. And each step of this, you move closer and closer to this virus could really become pathogenic in people. So you narrow down the field, you reduce the cost, and you end up with a small number of viruses that really do look like killers. Then you look in people and you say...
Unreal. Just unreal. Those sorts of things. I know, Natalie, you're more about the data and the research and the facts. I will read between the lines here. I mean, the flippancy with which he talks about these killer viruses, to me, is the real standout moment of this clip. He sounds like a total sociopath. And remember, total sociopath. Go ahead.
Not to discredit our wonderful abilities to unearth clips, but there was also a forget when it was from, but just less than a year before COVID-19, where Peter Daszak talks about similarly these kind of gain-of-function type experiments, manipulating, making these viruses a lot more transmissible and lethal to humans. And he talks about it in that clip. I believe it was Tucker Carlson who aired it, but with a similar sense of just, I don't know what the right word is, but just very casual, very casual tone.
Callous.
It's totally fine. And then I think it's funny if the only time I've really ever seen him, because I have watched a lot of his speeches.
You lucky girl.
The tone. Yeah, I have to say it's hard to differentiate the accents between you two. Sometimes I don't know. No, I'm kidding.
But you don't want to start on the comparisons of voices here.
It was really funny. I don't know. Maybe people saw it, but there was an article in the Daily Mail. I think it was probably last weekend, about how photographers from the outlet had gone to his house and they were taking pictures of him. And he was quoted as saying, "You need to remove your car from our drive right now, leave the area and never come back. Goodbye. I have no comment." It just seems so out of character. I've never seen him get so passionate about something, except when it was, stop, we need to continue covering up. I can, potentially have helped fund an institute that helped, create or do research that maybe led to the creation of COVID-19, but I won't answer for it. But no, I'll talk for hours on end about how my organization is so amazing and how we can, do this complex research, or I guess not him, his Chinese colleagues. But it really is an interesting psychology there that I think deserves and definitely will get more, analysis and just more watching of his videos.
I will give you that for you it might be hard to differentiate between me and Peter Daszak's accents. If you will give me that it's hard for me to differentiate between you and Rebecca Black.
That's offensive.
It's Friday, gotta get down on Friday. Everybody's looking forward to the weekend. Friday, getting down on Friday. Everybody's looking forward to the...
How about that? Is that a deal? Do we have that deal?
I don't think that's an accurate comparison. Can I give you my defense?
Go on.
I have one really hardcore Twitter troll who just hates everything I do, but they always say the only thing that they like about me is that they think that I have a nice voice.
I'm not saying. I think Rebecca Black has a lovely voice. What are you trying to say? Don't be a hater.
Rebecca Black is known for having a terrible and annoying voice.
Well, I think it's just lovely, and I think you're incredibly mean for saying that.
Well, I think we need to add Peter Daszak to the line. Let him give his input. Well, I guess I would, but we're
Wait,
blocked.
hang on. Have we tried calling Peter Daszak? I think we need to.
I don't think
I think we
so.
need to try and dial him in real time to the show at one point. I think I just heard.
I bet you.
Remember, podcasts are pre-recorded, but I just in advance. I just heard a cheer going up amongst the audience, going, "Yes, do that, do that."
I was going to say, I bet if he doesn't pick up, maybe She's Angry created or recorded his voicemail, or he has a really weird voicemail. That'll be very good.
Maybe he's got Rebecca Black's Friday as his voicemail song.
There's a good chance.
So look, just to round off on this Daszak thing,
Yeah.
right? How now, given that this clip is, it'll do the rounds in as much as any national pulse piece like this does the rounds, and people will pay attention to it, and people will internalize it, and 99.5% of the United States Congress people that should be doing things about this will eventually ignore it. And some people will try and push the thing forward on it, and then it will resurface, right, in a month or something on the Daily Mail, without giving us credit and so on and so forth. Whatever, right? That's just our lives, ladies and gentlemen. But how then, given the context of this speech, the content of the speech, can Dr. Fauci ever really seriously go up there and say, in no way, shape, or form was the United States government under my purview funding gain-of-function research?
Well, I mean, he won't be able to, and I think that's why of the media rounds that you see him doing, there's such softball questions. I would not be surprised if there's some sort of agreement, whether, quite literally it's spoken about in the sense that, you can't ask about the emails, you can't ask about Wuhan, you can't ask about if NIAID ever funded any research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So I really think that we need to get another, whether you say it's kind of the People's COVID Commission, or I just think that we need someone.
By the way, you're
Senator
going to be
Rand.
the chairman of that. You and Shari
Happily.
Moxon are going to be the co-chairman of the People's COVID Commission.
Well, I'll record a theme song in the style of Rebecca Black too. But no, I think
It's
that
Daszak,
yeah.
Daszak.
yeah. Well, I don't, frankly, not to be too pessimistic, I don't think that you'll ever see from a mainstream media outlet really pushing him on funding the Wuhan lab. But I think if and when he's in front of Congress, senators again, I could see him being pushed more so on the funding of the lab.
So I might slightly disagree with you there, this is literally just an experience thing. My experience on these over the course of my involvement in politics and the media is that at some point somebody on the left, in the media especially, so badly needs to pull themselves out of some other muck that they decide that they're gonna make a beeline towards the villains on the right. right? And try and put them on the spot. And it's somebody like Chris Cuomo. And it'll be something like how Chris Cuomo covered up for his brother for so long. Some document will come out or some text message will come out or whatever. And then Cuomo will do like a 2-hour sit-down interview with Fauci, and he'll grill him for 15 minutes on the lab and gain of function and Peter Daszak and Echo Health. I don't know. But believe me, if that exact thing comes true, I deserve, $1 billion in Pulitzer Prize money. But it's something like that because these people have such little in the way of moral backbone that every so often they need to borrow a little bit from us, and that's what I think is going to happen. I also think what you're saying effectively here, Natalie, is that Fauci perjured himself in front of Rand Paul.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just don't really know what the tipping point would be to get the mainstream media to kind of turn on Fauci, because if you would have asked me that question a week ago, I probably would have jokingly said, well, if we have a video of Peter Daszak admitting that he was creating killer viruses with Chinese researchers, then maybe Fauci, the tables would turn and people would see Fauci as lying.
Bless you,
but I think
Natalie. That is such an innocent way to look at it. These things come out of political imperatives. They come out of necessity, not out of morality. And this is the same thing with the border, right? I mean, why Kamala Harris is down there, talking about, hey, don't come to the border, is because they've polled it. And 95% of Americans want the border shut, all right? Well, I'm being hyperbolic, but it's a vast majority of people who want the border properly policed. And the Biden regime knows that, and the media knows that, and that's why they cannot afford to piss that many people off. Look at there's a reason I read out those Rasmussen report numbers earlier on in this program. Do you believe that Dr. Anthony Fauci has told the truth about U.S. government funding for gain-of-function virus research? 40% say yes, 46% say no. If you creep that no number over 50%, you will. That is your political imperative. That is the moment in which people start going, oof, the whole country basically is heading this way.
I hope we get there. And I will do everything in my power to.
Well, it all started on April 14th, 2003, when...
I was going to bring that up.
Well, segues. Dr. Anthony...
It's your podcast. You have to do the segue.
No, I know. That I just did one, and then you stepped on it by saying I was going to bring that up.
That's not what Rebecca Black sounds like.
You don't want me to actually try to imitate your voice.
I think
that would be a legitimate HR complaint if I did that. I think that would be bullying in the workplace.
Can I give a shout out to 46 is a fraud, the user, because I've been meaning to.
Well,
everyone should join the Discord.
Hang on. Natalie, not everybody who listens to this podcast knows what the Discord is and knows who 46 is a fraud is. Give that some context.
So, for those who aren't aware, if you go to the fundrealnews.com, you can subscribe and become a member of the National Education bungled the name of our outlet.
What a podcast! We don't do it for a week. It's all just crumbling to bits. The walls are closing in on us.
Yeah, it's sad. I hear the walls there. Yeah. Okay. Well, you can go to. Let me restart. You can go to fundrealnews.com.
Hold on. Hang on. Let's start the whole show over. All right, welcome to the National Pulse. It is Tuesday, June the 8th, the year of our Lord, 2021. Our guest is Rebecca Black, joining us on the line. All right.
Friday.
By the way, I happen to believe this doesn't apply to anybody else. When you and I are on the podcast, it is the single most entertaining podcast in the country. I genuinely believe that, and I genuinely believe it because it's signal, it's humor, and it's we break news, we do real news. And I wish all the best to Crystal and Saga and what's it called, Breaking Points and all of these other things. I think this is the best show in the country. Natalie, why should people support it? Where can they support it? And then who do you want to give a shout out to?
Okay, yes. So you should go to fundrealnews.com. There are various levels of subscription to help support the National Pulse, whether you want to, call into the podcast, have a phone call with Raheem, or just give whatever you can to help fund our investigations. If you donate $5 a month, I believe I am correct on that figure,
Yes.
you can join our exclusive Discord chat channel. For those of you who
Which
aren't
you get at
familiar
all
with
levels of membership, by the way, as well.
Yes.
It's not just a $5 membership. Yeah.
I am not a good saleswoman, but nonetheless, it doesn't take a good saleswoman to sell the Discord chat channel because it's
It
so
sells
much fun.
itself.
I know it
These
does.
babies
Raheem's
sell
on there-
themselves.
Raheem's on there more than I am, but
That's true.
I'm making an effort to go.
Well, you're
on
the
there
star
more.
of the show,
But-
so you can't be there that often.
True, I'm too busy watching all my old clips
C-SPAN
of Peter
clips.
Daszak. Well, yeah, I'm a C-SPAN junkie. I got an ad that I could buy my dad C-SPAN merch for Father's Day, and I was like, nope, that's not what I'm gonna be buying. But if you
So
join
in the
Discord,
Discord, yeah.
yes, you can talk not only with me and Raheem, but a ton of people who also support our work, ostensibly think the same way that you do about all these issues, help
Best people on
promote
the
and
planet.
kind of just. Yeah, no, they're so awesome. I enjoy talking to them, whether it's about kind of inside baseball, about Washington, D.C., even hair tips. It's awesome. And one user in particular, 46, is a fraud. I've been meaning to give a shout out to because he so kindly asked, and since everyone in the Discord is so kind about sharing our work and really sending it far and wide to every corner of the earth, maybe even the Wuhan Institute of Virology, I'm very grateful for everything that they've done. So I just want to say thank you to the Discord.
Yeah, it's super cool, and I know they're also planning a gathering as well, a get together. I think we're also going to do a Christmas party with them somewhere in the world, Natalie. So
Wuhan.
in Wuhan, Christmas party. There is a huge number of people who are joining up to that now. I think there's 1,000 active people in the private Discord chat at the moment. We have thousands more members over at the National Pulse, and if you go to fundrealnews.com, we've got some announcements to make as well in terms of our growth and changes to the Pulse and stuff. I won't do that quite yet, but ladies and gentlemen, make sure that you stay abreast of all of that. Let's go back to Fauci from 18 years ago, since we talked about it 10 minutes ago and then didn't actually get to it. I'm gonna play the clip right now, but I think it goes right to the heart of everything we've been talking about, Natalie. This was a great find. Here's Dr. Fauci 18 years ago on C-SPAN. No, and for some reason it's not playing. Hold on, I got it.
Singapore and Hong Kong.
We hear from a physician in Durham, North Carolina. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Dr. Fauci.
Good morning.
And, Pedro. You've been at the NIH a pretty long time, and it seems to me that during your tenure, our ability to control infectious diseases hasn't improved, but in fact worsened. And even basic health tips such as you can't use antibiotics to treat viral infections has not been adequately communicated to the public because, for instance, people will come in demanding an antibiotic for a common cold, or any other viral infection, which has certainly served to create more resistant strains. Not saying that this has anything to do with this particular SARS epidemic, but don't you think it's time that you step down and let someone else who has a more effective message?
Actually, no. She wants to know if I want to step down because we're getting too many resistance.
Actually, no. And that, by the way, that response, that nervous response, tells you everything you need to know about Fauci 18 years ago. It's the same Fauci we've got today. Bungled messaging. People don't really know what's going on as a result of his messaging. Gosh, it would be a different world if he did step down 18 years ago, wouldn't it be, Natalie?
We should have listened to this physician from Durham, North Carolina, I guess. Whoever you are, please identify yourself somehow, because you probably are the most correct person in the history, the recent history of this country. But yeah, and I think that this clip, while part of it is funny, I think his response is amazing. That actually no, and then the laughter. But I also think that if you kind of understand what she's saying, talking about how his agency, or at least under his role, has just failed completely to communicate to the public, basic tenets of public health, of prescribing certain types of drugs and creating more resistant strains as a result of certain viruses. And I really think that that gets to the heart of the issue. His ability to communicate is just, it's one day it's this, one day it's that. He's called flip-flop Fauci
because he
for a reason.
care about the science.
Mm-hmm.
That is it. I mean, he doesn't care about the science. And this is the frustration here was not. This lady was not talking about a small difference on something. This is specific things that were happening 18 years ago that she was saying, hey, look, you had one job, Dr. Fauci, and you get a big F for it, right? He knew that at the time. You got to go and watch this clip as well, but over at the National Pulse website, ladies and gentlemen, because you got to see his physical reaction to being asked to step down. This is why he doesn't do anything like this anymore, right? Nowadays, it's all set piece interviews, and here are the questions you can ask. Here's what we won't be answering, etc., etc. Natalie, we have so much up over the last week over at thenationalpulse.com. Loads of great stories. And I thank you for that. Anything else in particular you wanted to raise before we bounce today?
I think we've just continued exposing how, especially a lot of these influential think tanks like the Atlantic Council have been taking Chinese Communist Party cash. And I think that that's also really important because obviously a very, very, very pervasive narrative we're hearing now is about how the mainstream media helped to cover up kind of the origins of COVID-19. And obviously we've done extensive reporting as to how these outlets are beyond compromised by the Chinese government. But I also think that another kind of institution, an entity in DC that utterly failed this pandemic is the think tank class of people. And not that we ever had high hopes for them to begin with, but all of these bodies that have millions, frankly, billions of dollars in funding that are supposed to, get to the bottom of problems plaguing the world, even ones that are supposed to be scientific in their nature, they did absolutely nothing to get to the bottom of COVID-19. I can't think of one actually informative report from a so-called, elite establishment think tank that really even talked about the origins of COVID-19. They all took the Chinese Communist Party at their word. And I think that the story that we have about the Atlantic Council kind of speaks to that in the broader ecosystem that exists here in Washington, D.C.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. Natalie Windsor, thank you so much for joining us here today on the National Pulse podcast.
Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to make sure that we give a shout out to some of our friends and partners who were just so kind in linking to us. And I want you, please, this is a request from me to you, I want you please to go to their websites and show them some love. Tell them the National Pulse sent you. Go to their comment section, say, hey, Raheem sent me. He wants to say thank you. He said thank you on his podcast. And here are the websites, right? And you can communicate with these people if they don't have a comment section. Do it on Twitter, do it on their Facebooks, do it on Telegram, all of it. So number one is citizenfreepress.com. The long-standing people who listen to this podcast know citizenfreepress.com. Knows how much we value Kane and the whole team over there. Citizenfreepress.com has a comment section. Go over there and tell them I sent you. The other one, of course, is the Bongino Report. Dan Bongino, Matt Palumbo and the team, always linking into the National Pulse. We're always grateful for it. Find them online. Tell them we said thank you. I do that every day. But make sure you thank them as well. They love the audiences. And they love the National Pulse audience. So let's make sure they hear from you. The good friends at pjmedia.com, whatfinger.com, thelibertydaily.com, all of these great websites linking into the National Pulse almost every single day, and I'm entirely grateful for it. What I'm also grateful for, ladies and gentlemen, is your support. Support from people like Lauren, Raymond, Michael, Brent, Lisa, Margaret, Joe, Gary, Nancy, Robert, Miriam, John, Catherine, Diane, Kyle, Kelly, Marilyn, Randall, Howard, Pam, Melissa, Jim, Lois, Bob, Richard, Darren, Pauletta, Michael, Rob, Jack, Mark, Linnell, Jennifer, Amy, Annette, Jacob, Stuart, Joseph, Michael, all these people who head on over to fundrealnews.com and keep this going. Thank you.